In today's video, I'm explaining the main things I've kept in mind to improve my photography dramatically, both as a professional photographer and in my personal work. Today's video is a bit different because what we're actually going to be seeing is a talk that I gave this week at a local camera club, Musselburgh Camera Club near Edinburgh. It's very nice to be asked, so thank you to those guys for having me. But the topic of the talk was all about expanding your mental kit bag and why adding new techniques, new ideas, new skills into your kit bag is so much more valuable than simply adding a new lens to your kit bag. But I won't waffle on now. There's plenty of me doing that actually in my talk. So it's a little bit of a different one, probably back to normal next week. But if you are interested in this talk and in the lessons that I've learned as I've followed the road to being a professional photographer, do sit back, watch the talk. It's fairly long, but hopefully fairly enjoyable. So maybe just find a comfortable seat and a cup of tea and just sort of leave it on and see if you like it. But that's it from me for now. Enjoy, and I will see you next time. Roll the clip. I've got a whole script, so if it seems like I'm reading from a pre-prepared talk, it's because I am, of course. But I do want to talk about the importance of always learning in photography, and as the title of the talk was called, expanding your mental kit bag, widening your field, widening your scope in photography in order to learn more. Because no field of photography exists on its own. If you think about car photography, taking photos of cars, you've got to approach that like you're photographing a product. You've got to think about the lighting, think about the composition in that. If you think about macro photography, as I showed before, that's elements of maybe landscape photography. Maybe there is lighting involved in that from like a product photography perspective. If you think about I suppose portrait and fashion, that is again, you've got to think about lighting. Maybe you're photographing a portrait out in the wilderness, in the wildlife, in the forest, and you've got to really think about the landscape photography as well. So every genre of photography very much intermingles with another. And it's why I think that like wedding photography is sometimes one of the most difficult genres, because you've really got to kind of be a master of so many different types of photography in order to do well at one thing. Has anyone shot a wedding before, or even dared to think? I'm seeing some nodding. You've done one. Yeah. How did you find it? Not good. Very stressful is exactly the thing. I've done some, which I'll come to, anxiety through the roof. But I think the reason is because if you think about your average wedding day, think about it from a photography perspective, you might start the day photographing, say, the bride's shoes. Maybe it's the rings, or maybe the groom's got a fancy new watch for the wedding day. That, we're talking product photography, how to show off these items at their best. Then maybe you'll move on to the venue being set up. You're trying to show these beautiful, maybe it's vaulted ceilings in an old hall and the lovely decoration. That has more in common with architecture photography, or maybe, I suppose, event photography and that kind of thing. Then you move through to taking the beautiful portraits of the couple. So suddenly you're on portrait photography. Maybe you're doing, it's more akin to fashion photography, when you're really trying to show off this beautiful bridal gown at its best. And then, of course, you're trying to spend the day capturing these lovely candid moments, more like a press and news photographer. So it involves so many different elements that you've got to be thinking of these skills from so many different genres of photography in order to do that work. And the same applied to my photography, certainly my photography journey when I started at CNET. I started out doing things like this, fairly basic product shots, whatever I was writing about. I'm a journalist as well as a photographer for CNET. So I write a lot about various things, in this case, a Bluetooth speaker, and it's a picture of the product. It's just a photo of some buttons, basically. But as I started doing more and more, as I had to take more of these shots, I really wanted to kind of think about the shots that I'm taking, think about how I can push myself further. So I started covering more events. Here's another phone. It's just a picture of a phone in my hand. It's not exact. It's fine. It's not exactly the most standout image when on a big sort of global news organization, you would really want those images to stand out. You want them to capture an audience's attention. Fair to say that I don't think really does. But as things moved on, I did start to see myself a little bit more as trying to get into photojournalism, attending more events, covering more things. This is the Bloodhound SSC, the land speed record, their rocket car. Things like the Red Bull soapbox race, great fun. Yeah, good fun. So, that was very much kind of developing these skills as a photographer, being able to see things when I'm out at these events, be able to react quickly to them, know how to operate my camera. So it's very much about trying to build on those skills so that whatever I go and do as a photographer and as a journalist, I'm able to capture that story. Same was true when I started doing more dedicated photo stories. This was a great one inside the Natural History Museum that I did. This behind the scenes look at some of the quite frankly terrifying things they've got in these tanks. I got to hold a 130 million year old Stegosaurus skull, a real one. So that's certainly a career highlight. That's why I thought I'd throw this one in. Going inside McLaren, inside their production facility, doing these stories on how these amazing cars are put together. Again, like no matter what topic it was that I was writing about and photographing, it's so important to be approaching this from very much like an image first perspective. How are we going to tell this story? How are we going to put these images across in a really exciting, engaging way to our audience that brings them in and very much shows off what these companies are doing? And this was fairly early on in what I was doing, but it was really exciting to start to like flex my photography muscles in a professional sphere like this. This one was great. This one was working with the London Air Ambulance. I think they just started using like 4G in their apps and in their systems in order to like reduce the time it takes them to get to an accident by I think about 4 minutes, which is a huge amount for them. It's very much like the difference between life or death. And so doing the story is really great from both the journalist perspective and as a photographer. But it was one that really relied on knowing how to react, knowing how to respond to things, because this was a live ambulance helicopter helipad on top of the Whitechapel Hospital. When it came in, I had seconds. This isn't something where I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't get the shot. Can we do that again? Can you just take off, fly around, pop back, and I'll get the shot this time? Very much had to know how to get what I needed as they're going out. The only reason I was able to consider getting shots like this, being able to think about going to these places, putting these shots together, knowing that I'm probably in the way. These are people out trying to save lives and they don't need a photographer scurrying around trying to get the shots and do things. So I had to kind of make sure that I really knew what I was doing, that I knew that I could get those shots with seconds. The same goes for my car photography, which I've done quite a lot of. We have automotive brands, so a lot of what I do, pre-COVID anyway, involved a lot of cars. But my car photography, for me, very much leans into my love and my passion for landscape photography. I really try and approach these kinds of shots very much as landscape images first, car photos second. So I approach these scenes when we're planning on what it is we want to do, thinking about the landscapes and thinking about like the story I want to tell, the mood that I want to get across, what kind of emotions maybe you're trying to evoke with these kinds of images. So I'm thinking about the composition, about the way like the road curves away into that. There's so much thought about the landscape, and then you just sort of put the car into that landscape. So having both those elements together is important. Same again here up in the somewhere up in the Highlands. It's on the North Coast 500, I don't know the exact location, but again, showing this amazing rugged Scottish landscape, this open road and these two cars sort of jousting together on that Very much about the landscape first, and same here on Kalasky Bridge up in the Highlands. It was all about the bridge, all about the way that it curves into the scene, this dramatic landscape, catching that weather at its absolute moodiest, which, I mean, I can't control that, but I was very, very glad to get conditions like this. And I think that's so important for these kinds of things. You have to think, if you just think about the car without thinking about the landscape, then your shots can only really go so far. If you only thought about taking a photo of the car, then you can just take it in an Asda car park, and sure, you've got a photo of the car. That's what you set out to get, and that's what you've got. You're not going to necessarily be thinking about the landscape like this in the same way. That said, actually, this was taken in a car park, just in a sports centre somewhere in North London, just same as outside here. But the reason I was able to get this shot was because I'd spent so much time really understanding how to work with lighting on cars. I'd really tried to sort of develop these new techniques that would allow me to get a shot which could look as though it was taken in studio, that's got perfect even lighting across, that shows off this £250,000 supercar in such a dramatic way, and yet behind it was just some hockey playing fields and some kids kicking things around. So like, having developed those skills really does transform. It has transformed the shots that I've been able to get on a professional level. But it does take a lot of effort doing this kind of thing. If I go back to, talking about weddings, I remember when I was first asked to do a wedding by some really good friends of mine, and I had never done a wedding at this point. I never wanted to do weddings. I didn't want to be a wedding photographer. And when they first asked me, I tried very politely to say no, thank you, which is quite a difficult thing to do politely when they've asked so kindly to do this. But they did convince me, because they made some very good points about how they wanted to kind of have that connection with the photos taken. They wanted someone kind of within their group taking these shots. And I think that was a very, very good point. And so I did eventually say yes, and I thought, great, I know how to handle a camera. I think it's fine. And then I saw their wedding venue, and quite frankly, I shit myself just a little bit, because I mean, it was a beautiful venue, really, really lovely place. It was this like this old Art Deco cinema in West London, and it was stunning, beautiful, like red velvet chairs and lovely red velvet drapes, and like really, really nice, but so dark, like really dark. Beautifully romantic lighting, of course, and everyone looked great, and it felt very luxurious and very Art Deco, very of its time, as everyone was in there. But as photographers, we know that darkness is rarely our friend, certainly when it comes to portraits and weddings and whatnot. So I knew that I had a real challenge on my hands, because I owned a flash, I think, at this point, but I'd never really used it to any great extent. I'd never used it for portraits, and I'd never used it off camera in the way that I knew that I wanted to. It'd be very easy to just pop that flash on camera, point it forward, and just snap away, and then everyone would look like they've been hit in the face with this big bright light, and I wanted to avoid that. I wanted to get something that I was really proud of. So knowing that I didn't have these skills, and knowing that I'm staring down the barrel of disappointing my friends entirely, I hit the internet hard, and I read every single thing I could. I spent hours and hours obsessing over lighting, how to get that light off my camera on a stand, working with umbrellas, with softboxes, none of which I owned at this point, but I just sort of hit Amazon and tried to get what I could. Went on YouTube, watched every tutorial that I possibly could, just desperate to try and get these skills together. I went down to the venue as well. They were very accommodating. They let me go down, and I just spent half an afternoon just practicing by myself. And I got one of their, I think it was a cleaner, something. I'll just stand here, and I set this lighting up. I was like, okay, just pretend you're the bride and groom. And he had no idea what was going on. And I tried these shots again and again and again and again and again, until that I felt I was kind of getting somewhere, until that I felt that I would be able to kind of do justice to what my friends wanted. And this is one of the shots that we got in the end, which is one that we'd kind of discussed. We wanted to really lean into the cinema aesthetic. The cinema was very much like with the invites and everything else was very much that kind of vibe in there. So we'd got these 3D glasses, we got the popcorn, and we put this on. And very lit on lighting, one of my flashes didn't work, and I almost had a panic attack, and I was able to manage to get it to work. But I'm very, very proud of this. I'm very, very proud of the fact that this is printed out like massive in this big frame on their mantelpiece. And I thought for my first wedding, I'm not unhappy with that shot. And I used the same techniques on, this was my second wedding, but exactly the same techniques. It was about getting my camera off, my flash off the camera, knowing how to work with the ambient light in the room, knowing what I wanted to do. In this case, actually, there was a DJ who was setting up and he was kind of testing his spotlights, and I saw those and I went, aha, point those at the cake for me, please. And we tried this. I did a couple of test shoots with some of the groomsmen beforehand. But the only way that I was able to kind of see those lights, think about this kind of shot, think about what it is that I wanted to achieve with this photograph, was from having spent all that time in the previous one, learning these different skills, learning how to use light, how to balance those settings. So it's exactly the same technique in an entirely different image. Same thing here in my most recent one, the last one I did before I moved. Same thing again, knowing how to balance that ambient exposure so we can get this London skyline, get those lights, get that nice thing. And then inside this old lighthouse, I was able to convince them to crawl through a little access hatch, which in a white dress is a big ask for a bride, but thankfully she was really keen on it. And inside the lighthouse, I'd left this flash off camera, just a standard speed light, bare head on a stand, firing at them to get this really nice side light coming in. So it's a shot that I'm very proud of. But again, it's the same techniques before, those same like principles that I'd really tried so hard to learn in my first one that I've been able to apply here. Same thing again. Not a wedding this time, a very lonely wedding if it is. This is John Sterling. John Sterling. He's the owner of the Arbiki distillery. And this is actually for a big story that actually Katie, my partner, and I were doing for CNET. Because they're doing some like really, really interesting stuff with like unusual old grains and rye whiskies, bringing rye whiskey back to Scotland. And as he was kind of giving us the tour around his distillery, and I saw this grain silo, and I thought, aha, okay, this is all about your grain. This is the thing that you're proud of. I said, okay, John, can you get in your grain silo? I want to photograph you. And he gave me this look, and I was like, really? I said, yeah, trust me, just clamber in. And he did, bless him, thank you. He clambered up. It took him a little while, and he got into position. And I'm really, really pleased because from like an editorial perspective, it'd be so easy to think, okay, I'm photographing the owner of a whiskey distillery, so let's just get him standing with a glass of whiskey, the sort of thing you might see in like maybe a trade publication, or maybe he's taking a little sip or looking at the color. I thought, I want to do something a little bit different, a little bit unusual for our big feature and make our stuff really stand out. But the technique is the same thing that we've seen in this one. We've got this off-camera light. It's no different. I've got my camera set up here. My flash is somewhere over here, pointing at him, and it's lighting it up. So those techniques that I've been able to learn from my weddings, I've been able to directly put into use on this. And it allowed me to, as we're walking past this thing, it allows me to see shots in advance in a different way because I know that I've got these different skills, these different techniques in my kit bag, as it were. So I was able to think, okay, I think this is going to look really cool if I can put him in here. So thankfully, I was quite pleased that he did do that. However, with this, I did things a little bit the other way around in that I had massively boasted and overpromised to Bugatti in advance of getting this. So this was for the launch. This is the Bugatti Chiron. It's the press launch of this, and I was sent out with some of our team for CNET. in order for me to get the photos. And normally these press launches of cars are fairly run of the mill. They get a car, they get a section of road kind of booked out for you, and someone runs up and down the car and on the road. And this is one of the other shots I get. Natural light on the road. I am harnessed to the back of one of our crew cars. I'm shooting away as we follow the car like that. So that's kind of the usual thing that you expect to get. And a lot of other press will have very similar shots to this, if not basically identical. And so I thought, I want to do something a little bit different, because I knew that what we were doing for this launch was going to be this like big magazine spread. So I knew that we needed like this double page hero shot. And so I'd spoken to Bugatti in advance of this, and I said, hey, look, I want to do this really great spread. We're doing this big magazine feature. Can you get the car in somewhere cool, maybe at night, and we'll do this really interesting shot? And the fools turned around and said, sure, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds exciting. What an idea. And they said, yeah, so we've got this space. We thought, how about we take it down to this, I don't know this specific bit, but I think this is the Torre de Belém in the middle of Lisbon city centre. And they sort of sent me this like Google picture of it, and I thought, yeah, it looks great. That sounds fine. But I thought it was totally a relaxed, low key little thing that we're doing. But still, I wanted to get some good stuff, because I knew that I'd done some natural light photos of cars before, but I'd never worked with light for cars. And working with light for cars is a very, very different experience. It can be very, very tricky because, of course, it's so reflective. So, like with the weddings, I hit the internet hard, and I looked at every tutorial I could find, and I looked at every YouTube video I could find about how to use light painting, and most of it was about using LED continuous lights, and I didn't have any of those. I just had one speed light. So I had to really spend as much time as I can learning all these different techniques. I borrowed my flatmate's car. We parked on the driveway, and I just took shot after shot after shot after shot, just practicing on this little knackered old Peugeot 206. In order to practice for a £3 million Bugatti, which was fun. And I kind of arrived feeling relatively confident that I knew what I was doing, but it didn't really matter because we were going to get this anyway. So if this stuff didn't really come out, no big deal. They won't mind. I won't mind. My editor won't mind. It's fine. Until I actually turned up, and we actually got the car that evening, and they turned up with a driver, with a mechanic, with a full police escort of multiple cars to take us down to this part of the city. No, that's John Sterling. Down here, which had also been arranged with a full police cordon around the area so that no one can get near to the car, and I had it entirely free to shoot. And I suddenly realized, this is not the casual, doesn't really matter either way photo shoot that I thought it was. And I don't think I've ever been more frightened as a photographer in my life, because I was suddenly very painfully aware that I had massively overpromised with these people on what I could do, because I'd never done anything really like this. But I did manage to make it work, because I'd spent that time doing it. It's a little GIF. I don't know if it'll play. Oh, there we go. So this is a GIF I made of the process of putting it together. So that's just walking around frame after frame with this speed light in a big softbox, and then in Photoshop you basically piece all those different layers together. So I think the final shot, this one, is about 50 something different exposures in total. And then I walked down to the waterfront, just down here, full power on my light, fired up at the buildings, try and get that. It was a huge amount of effort for one photo, which actually made it more difficult, because as I was taking those shots, you don't know if you've got the shots. You all know that feeling of looking at the back of your screen, or maybe if you're doing film, maybe not so much, but of just not really knowing if you've got the shot. Sometimes you look and go, oh wow, I've done it. Well, that's really, really cool. No idea, absolutely no idea. So I just basically shot so much that I thought I've got all these different options to use later on when I hit Photoshop. So yeah, I did get this, and I got some others, and I was obviously very relieved that all that effort had paid off. But all that learning of Flash, that obsessing over lighting, obsessing over how to kind of put these things together, that directly then influenced my my product photography on a professional level. So I went from quite basic shots like this that we've seen before, and this kind of thing. Again, it's the phone in the hand. Technically, you know, the phone's in focus and it's sort of, it is lit, it's visible. But all that time and effort I'd spent in trying to learn and develop these lighting skills, these composition skills, how to set up shots, like allowed me to go from shots like this through to more eye-catching, more commercial level shots like this, when I'm really thinking about things like the lighting, things about the staging of shots. Same with this lovely gin just up the road. If you've not had it, highly recommend it. With this Google Pixel 6, again, for me, these are shots that are on our homepage. CNET we're the world's biggest tech site, so we have to work hard to really show something off to our audience. So it's really about having something eye-catching, something that stands out, something that, crucially, our competitors don't have, because our competitors were still doing the I'm holding a phone in my hand shot. And so I'm trying to think, how can I take my stuff further? But the tools, the techniques that I've used have been very, very similar there. Yeah, same again with this. Again, all about that lighting, all about knowing how to balance those settings in your camera and with the light. And that's those same techniques in lighting and also with like close focusing, focus stacking, product photography has also directly translated to my macro photography, because I started out with shots like this many years ago. Like one of my first macro shots, B isn't even in focus, which might have been something I should have considered when I actually took the photo, but apparently not. Same again, I think it was on the same day even. And that's taken me through to macro shots like this, macro shots like this. I'm hoping you might agree that this is an improvement over the previous one. If not, I'm doing something very wrong. This little chap. They're all the same skills, these same skills in how to really understand. This is still lit. My flash is still off camera. It's exactly the same techniques, the same tools that I've used before, the exact same flash, even from, you know, doing the car, doing those weddings, I've used here, still off camera, coming into the side. This one, again, pretty much the same thing. And these genres might not seem in any way connected. The subject matter might not necessarily seem connected in what I'm taking photos of, but you can directly draw a line to skills that I've learned in one genre and then how they have influenced another, how learning something in car photography has helped me take better macro photos, has helped me take better product photos. So by having those skills in my back pocket has influenced and improved every photo that I take, no matter what genre it has been. But that has only come about as a desire to want to learn and to want to explore more as a photographer. And the more I have learned, the more I've been able to shoot. And the more creative my shots have been able to get. And thankfully, the better that they've been received. And I think the benefits are there whether you are a total beginner, if you've just got a camera for Christmas just gone. The importance of learning is always there, but it's also there if you're a 40-year veteran of the photography industry, because photography is always changing. There are always new tools arriving, new techniques, whether it's just like new Photoshop tools that allow you to do something in a different way, or it's new camera things that maybe you hadn't really considered doing. There is always something more to learn. And I always find that is one of the most exciting things about photography for me, is that there's always something more that you can do. And it's why that I still spend so much of my time looking at different tutorials, looking at things even now. I've been a professional over 10 years, but I'm always trying to learn more. I don't think there's ever a time when you go, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. Like, I don't. Half the time I'm still trying to do something brand new that I'm just as much as a beginner as anyone else, just to see what I can do. And I think part of that is because I don't feel that I've ever had any natural talent for photography. I think the only reason that I've been able to develop these skills and see shots that might be there and think about shots is because I spent so much time learning these techniques and learning about photography because I cared about it. But I mean, I'm sure we've all seen people or know people, or maybe some of you are those people who are so naturally talented that they just see shots, they see things in a different way. And that must be a really exciting thing to be in, but that has never been me. I've had to really, really work. And thankfully, I've enjoyed the process because otherwise it would be very, very boring. But to be honest, this has mostly been about the professional benefits of photography. And while that has been important to me as a professional photographer, there has also been huge amounts of benefits for the side of me that simply loves going out and taking photos. Because I have found that learning more about photography has also been the best way of staying creative and staying passionate about photography, particularly, of course, during the last couple of years when we've been trapped inside our homes for the most part and unable to go places and see fun things. So like creativity, I mean, mine has absolutely bottomed out on several occasions, and I'm sure everyone in this room has felt very much similar things. But if I'd have started with some of those early macro shots, I don't know why I moved on to this. Let's go back to that for a moment. If I'd started with some of those early macro shots and just kind of taken the same thing again and again, not really wanted to learn more, not really wanted to expand those skills, then I just take the same shot again and again. I go back out to the same flower, to the same bee, just do the same thing, not really thinking about my photos, not really thinking about what I've done, looking at that shot and thinking about how I want to be able to improve it. I kind of think sometimes that being a photographer but only sticking to one genre, it's similar to being a chef, but only cooking the same meal again and again and again. And sure, that might be a really great meal, and maybe over time you've really refined it so that you know what you're doing, but eventually you're going to get bored. But the really good chefs, they look around for inspiration. They look at fusion things. They look at the food of different cultures and how they can bring in different elements from different things, different areas that they hadn't really considered in order to put something exciting and unique together that really inspires their customers and have people coming back. So I kind of feel that sort of taking that like the Michelin star approach in restaurants is a good approach to photography, which is probably quite ironic because I really have no love for Michelin star food at all, do I? It's pie and mash for the most part. And there are plenty of days when the weather is foul because, of course, it's Scotland, and we just don't really feel like going outside, or maybe we're just not really feeling inspired at all. As I say, over the last 18 months, 2 years, there's been times when I've just haven't wanted even to pick up my camera. I've had zero desire to do it. And how do you fight that? It's difficult because you want to stay creative, you want to stay passionate. And so I started playing around with more things. So things like this, just trying different experiments at home, just in my house at home, these macro experiments, bit of oil on some water, in a glass tray, shooting through, 10-minute setup, but I think quite an interesting sort of shot. This is a soap bubble, close up, just a bit of washing up liquid in some water, blow a bubble, macro, close focus. Again, same techniques as with the product photography, close focusing, sometimes focus stacking, using that lighting, the same Photoshop techniques, object removal, dust removal, but this is almost entirely straight out of camera. So thinking about these different genres and these different techniques has been the thing that's really kind of given my photography a boost. Doing this one with this splash, I think I took 4,000 photos and I got 3 like this that I was actually happy with. It's incredibly difficult to time it. You can get these automated like dropper things that let you sort of do that every time, but I didn't have one. I was doing it the manual way and it took a long time. But doing it just kind of got me excited again. And again, I was learning about how light flash duration and how to freeze that motion, because that motion is frozen by the light, not by the shutter speed. That was taken at about 2-second shutter speed. But it was the short burst of light that freezes that in action. That wasn't a technique that I knew. I thought you freeze motion, you use 2,000ths of a second, 10,000ths of a second. So that was a whole new concept for me that I now know for something else. And does this make me excited to go out and shoot landscapes? I mean, no, like not directly, but doing things like this has kept me excited about photography. It's kept me passionate about photography, and that is the thing that's making me want to pick up my camera and go out and shoot more. Because it's not just the skills and the different techniques that are transferable between genres. That passion is transferable as well. That excitement that you get around taking photos is absolutely transferable as well. I found myself falling into that trap when I was feeling particularly lacking in creativity of looking for new gear. The trap, I imagine most people here have fallen into. You think, oh, okay, great. I haven't taken any new photos in a while. What I need is a new lens. That's going to fix everything. And of course it doesn't. And I didn't buy a new lens, because if I had, I'd have still been in lockdown. I'd still been wandering around the same streets around Leith. And I wouldn't have taken any more exciting photos. I'd taken the same thing, except I'd have spent, £1,000, £2,000 on a lens, and great, my creativity wouldn't have done that at all. So, buying a new lens, adding a new bit of kit to your kit bag is only going to go so far in taking your photography further, in increasing in increasing what it is that you do. But by thinking outside your chosen genre, by not necessarily considering yourself a landscape photographer, a street photographer, a product photographer, none of those things I call myself. I'm just, if someone says, oh, what do you do? I'm like, just photography. I can't, it's difficult to say exactly what it is, because my enjoyment comes from doing all these different things. So I would say if there are other genres of photography that you have never thought about doing, any other techniques that you've never thought about trying, then I urge you to give that a go, to try something entirely different. Try something like this that you might have never tried. I'd never tried this before. Very exciting to do, great techniques to learn, because that has been the single biggest thing that has helped me go from those early images to taking photos that I'm truly proud of, both professionally and personally today. And that's it from me. How are we doing time-wise? Do I need to do the dance, or are we good?